When 17-year-old Elijah Monroe fixed a millionaire's broken Mercedes on the side of the road, he thought he was just being helpful. But the moment the man saw Elijah's pendant, his dead father's last gift, everything changed. "Where did you get that?" the stranger whispered, his face draining of color. In that instant, Elijah's simple life shattered. The pendant wasn't just jewelry. It contained evidence of a billion-dollar conspiracy, corporate murder, and the real reason his father died at 29. Sometimes justice doesn't come from courtrooms or police stations. Sometimes it comes from a teenager with grease-stained hands and a necklace he never knew was loaded. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. And if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The late afternoon sun was starting to dip behind the warehouses of Chicago's South Side as Elijah Monroe pedaled his bike down the cracked sidewalk. At 17, he had the kind of wiry build that came from constant movement, part necessity, part restlessness. His backpack bounced against his shoulders, heavy with textbooks and the weight of decisions he wasn't ready to make. Another day. Another dollar, he muttered to himself, thinking about the shift he'd just finished at Frank's auto repair. His hands still smelled like motor oil and degreaser, a scent that had become as familiar as his mother's cooking. Home wasn't far, now, just past the old textile factory and through the neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. But Elijah's mind wasn't on dinner or homework. It was on the letter folded carefully in his back pocket, the one from the prestigious Midwest Institute of Mechanical Engineering. Full scholarship opportunity, they'd written, for students who show exceptional promise. Exceptional promise. The words made him laugh. Sure, he could take apart an engine blindfolded, but exceptional? That was for kids from the North Side, kids whose parents drove them to SAT prep classes instead of working double shifts at the hospital like his mom. As he rounded the corner onto Industrial Avenue, his thoughts were interrupted by an unusual sight. A sleek black sedan, the kind you only saw in this neighborhood when someone was lost or looking for trouble, sat at an awkward angle on the shoulder. Steam rose from under its hood like a defeated flag. Elijah slowed his bike. Every instinct told him to keep going. A young black kid approaching a fancy car with out-of-state plates? That story never ended well. But as he got closer, he could see the driver, an older white man in an expensive suit, talking frantically into his phone and gesturing at the car like it had personally betrayed him. "No, I told you, I can't wait 2 hours for a tow," the man was saying. "I have a board meeting at 7. Elijah's fingers tightened on the handlebars. "Keep going," his mind whispered. "Not your problem." But then the man looked up, and their eyes met. There was something in his expression, not fear or suspicion, but genuine distress. And beneath that, embarrassment. Before he could talk himself out of it, Elijah called out, "Engine trouble." The man lowered his phone, surprised. "Yes, actually, it just died. No warning." He paused, studying Elijah. "You know anything about cars?" Elijah couldn't help but smile. "A little." He pulled his bike onto the grass and approached the car. Up close, he could appreciate its lines. A Mercedes S-Class, probably last year's model. The kind of machine he'd only worked on in his dreams. "Mind if I take a look?" Elijah asked, already moving toward the hood. The man, Mr. Whitmore, as he introduced himself, seemed hesitant for a moment, then nodded. "Please, I'm already late, and—" But Elijah was already under the hood, his practiced eye scanning the engine. "When did it start acting up?" "About 5 minutes ago. It started losing power, then just stopped." Elijah nodded, his hands moving with the confidence of someone who'd been doing this since he was tall enough to reach an engine block. "Sounds like your alternator. See this belt here? It's slipping. And these connections," he pointed to a series of wires. "Corroded. Probably been building up for months." Mr. Whitmore leaned in, clearly impressed. "You can tell all that just by looking?" "It's like reading a story," Elijah said, not looking up from his work. Every engine tells you what's wrong if you know how to listen. For the next 20 minutes, Elijah worked while Mr. Whitmore watched, occasionally asking questions that revealed he knew more about boardrooms than brake lines. But there was something else in his questions, a genuine curiosity about Elijah himself. "So you work at a garage?" Mr. Whitmore asked. "Part-time. After school and weekends. And you learned all this there?" Elijah shrugged. "Some of it. My dad taught me the basics before he passed. Rest I picked up on my own." "Your father was a mechanic?" "Something like that." Elijah reached for a wrench in his backpack. "He worked with machines. All kinds." As he leaned deeper into the engine compartment, something slipped out from under his shirt, a silver pendant on a worn leather cord. It caught the fading sunlight, revealing an intricate design, 2 hands cradling a star. The change in Mr. Whitmore was immediate. His casual interest sharpened into something intense, almost hungry. "That pendant," he said, his voice suddenly tight. "Where did you get that?" Elijah straightened, confused by the sudden shift in tone. He touched the pendant self-consciously. "This? It was my dad's. One of the only things I have from him." Mr. Whitmore's face had gone pale. He stared at the pendant like it was a ghost, his lips moving slightly as if trying to form words that wouldn't come. "Sir?" Elijah asked, growing uncomfortable. "You okay?" The older man seemed to shake himself back to the present. "Yes, It's just, that's a very unique design. I've seen it before, really." Despite his unease, Elijah was curious. "Where?" But Mr. Whitmore had already turned away, pulling out his phone again. "I should call my office. Let them know I'll be late." Elijah returned to the engine, but the moment had shifted something. The air felt charged, heavy with unspoken questions. When he finally got the car running again, a temporary fix involving some creative wire work and a prayer, Mr. Whitmore seemed almost distracted as he thanked him. "Here," the man said, pulling out his wallet. "Let me pay you for your time." "No need," Elijah said quickly. "Just doing what anyone would do." "Not anyone," Mr. Whitmore corrected. He held out a business card instead. "Andrew Whitmore, Whitmore Ventures. If you ever need anything, a recommendation, advice about that engineering program you mentioned." Elijah took the card, surprised. "How did you know about that?" Mr. Whitmore smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. "You mentioned you were considering it while you were working. You should go. Don't let anything hold you back." As Elijah watched the Mercedes disappear down Industrial Avenue, he couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened, something bigger than fixing a stranger's car. He touched the pendant again, feeling its familiar weight against his chest. What was it about this old piece of silver that had shaken Andrew Whitmore so badly? The sun had set completely now, and the streetlights were flickering on. Elijah got back on his bike, but instead of feeling accomplished, he felt unsettled, like he'd just opened a door he didn't know existed. The smell of Carmen Monroe's famous chicken and rice filled their small apartment as Elijah walked through the door. His 8-year-old sister, Maya, was at the kitchen table, tongue stuck out, in concentration as she worked on her math homework. "You're late," his mother called from the stove, not turning around. "Frank keep you overtime again?" "No, Elijah hesitated, then decided to just say it. "I stopped to help someone with car trouble. This rich guy, his Mercedes broke down on Industrial." Carmen finally turned, wiping her hands on her apron. At 42, she still had the same determined, set to her jaw that Elijah saw in his own mirror every morning. "Rich guy? In our neighborhood?" "Yeah, he was lost, I think. But Ma, the strangest thing happened." Elijah dropped his backpack and moved to the sink to wash his hands. He saw Dad's pendant and just froze. Asked me where I got it. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot. Carmen's whole body had gone rigid. "Ma, why were you wearing that thing?" Her voice was sharp, almost angry. "I told you to keep it in the drawer. I always wear it, you know that." Carmen turned back to the stove, but Elijah could see the tension in her shoulders. "That pendant brings nothing but questions we don't need." Put it away. Questions about what? About Dad? Elijah. The warning in her voice was clear. Leave it alone. But he couldn't. Not now. After dinner, while Carmen helped Maya with her homework, Elijah retreated to his room. He pulled out the old shoebox from under his bed, his collection of his father's things. 2 photographs, a few tools, some papers that meant nothing to him. He studied the photos again. In one, his father stood proudly next to some kind of machine, the pendant visible at his throat. In the other, David Monroe was shaking hands with 2 other men in what looked like a warehouse. One man's face was turned away from the camera, but there was something familiar about his build, his posture. Elijah opened his laptop and typed Andrew Whitmore into the search bar. The results made him sit back in surprise. This wasn't just some rich guy. Andrew Whitmore was a legitimate millionaire, a venture capitalist who'd made his fortune investing in tech startups and engineering patents. Exceptional promise, Elijah muttered, remembering the letter from the engineering program. He clicked through more articles, reading about Whitmore's investments, his company, his reputation for finding innovative talent. A soft knock interrupted his research. Maya peeked around the door. Eli, can you help me with my science project? Sure, Squirt. He closed the laptop, but his mind was still racing. Why would someone like Andrew Whitmore recognize his father's pendant? The next morning at Frank's auto repair, Elijah found it hard to concentrate. He kept replaying yesterday's encounter, the way Whitmore's face had changed when he saw the pendant. Earth to Elijah! Frank's gruff voice cut through his thoughts. That transmission isn't going to fix itself. Sorry, Frank. Elijah forced himself to focus, but his hands moved automatically while his mind wandered. His phone buzzed just before lunch. An email from an address he didn't recognize. He opened it, nearly dropping the phone when he saw the signature. Andrew Whitmore. Elijah, I wanted to thank you again for your help yesterday. Your knowledge of mechanical systems is impressive. I'm hosting a private technology demonstration this Saturday at the Palmer House Hotel. I think you'd find it interesting given your obvious talents. Consider this a personal invitation. Best regards, Andrew Whitmore. Elijah read it 3 times, his heart racing. A tech demonstration? At the Palmer House? That was the kind of thing kids from his neighborhood only saw in movies. Yo, Eli. His best friend Luis appeared in the garage doorway, basketball under one arm. Lunch break. You coming? They sat on the bench outside, sharing sandwiches while Elijah showed Luis the email. This the same guy you helped yesterday? Luis asked, suspicious. The one who freaked about your dad's necklace? Pendant, and yeah. Luis shook his head. I don't know, man. Rich white dude suddenly interested in you, inviting you to fancy hotels? Sounds sketchy. Or it sounds like an opportunity. Elijah touched the pendant absently. What if he actually knew my dad? What if this is my chance to learn something? Learn what? Your pops died when you were little. Sometimes the past should stay buried. But Luis didn't understand. He had both parents, knew his whole family history back 3 generations. Elijah had fragments, pieces that didn't fit together, and a mother who shut down every time he asked questions. I'm going, Elijah decided. Your mom know about this? Elijah's silence was answer enough. That evening, Carmen found the email open on Elijah's laptop while he was in the shower. When he came out, she was sitting on his bed, fury and fear warring in her expression. Absolutely not, she said before he could speak. You don't even know what it's about. I know enough. She stood, pacing the small room. That man, that world, it's not for us, Elijah. Your father thought he could play in their league and look what happened. What did happen, Ma? You never tell me anything. Because there's nothing to tell. But her voice cracked, betraying her. David died, heart attack, end of story. Then why are you so scared of a pendant, of me going to some tech demo? Carmen stopped pacing, her shoulders sagging. You don't understand what you're walking into. Then tell me. But she just shook her head and left the room. Saturday morning, Elijah put on his best clothes, khakis and a button-down that were usually reserved for church, and slipped out before Carmen woke up. The bus ride to downtown felt like crossing into another world. The Palmer House Hotel rose like a golden monument to old money and older power. Inside, the lobby made him feel instantly out of place. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, people in suits that probably cost more than his mother made in a month. He almost turned around. Elijah. Andrew Whitmore strode across the lobby, looking genuinely pleased to see him. Today he seemed more relaxed, less corporate, but there was still something intense in the way he looked at Elijah. "I'm glad you came. The demonstration's upstairs. But first," he gestured to a quiet corner, "we need to talk." They sat in plush armchairs, while servers in bow ties glided past. Whitmore leaned forward, his voice low. "That pendant you're wearing, it belonged to a man I once owed my life to." Elijah's hand went instinctively to his chest. "My father?" Whitmore nodded slowly. "David Monroe. Your father wasn't just some mechanic, Elijah. He was brilliant. A genius, really, and he was my friend." The words hit Elijah like physical blows. Brilliant, genius, friend. These weren't words anyone had ever used to describe his father. "I don't understand," Elijah managed. "If you were friends, why haven't we ever met?" Whitmore's face darkened. "Because I failed him. When he needed me most, I stayed silent. And I've regretted it every day since." Before Elijah could ask more, Whitmore stood abruptly. "Come on, there's something you need to see." They rode the elevator in silence, Elijah's mind spinning. When the doors opened, they stepped into a conference room filled with prototypes, displays, technical demonstrations. But Whitmore led him past all of it to a small display case in the corner. Inside was a photograph. 3 men standing in front of a complex machine. Elijah recognized his father immediately, young and proud. Next to him stood a younger Andrew Whitmore, and the third man. "Who's that?" Elijah asked, pointing to the third figure. Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Clayton Reynolds, our former partner, the man who destroyed everything your father built." Elijah stared at the photograph, at his father's confident smile, at the pendant visible at his throat, the same pendant that now hung around Elijah's neck. The weight of it suddenly felt different, heavier with meaning he was only beginning to understand. "Tell me everything," Elijah said quietly. Whitmore looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You deserve to know the truth, all of it." As the tech demonstration continued around them, ignored and forgotten, Andrew Whitmore began to tell Elijah about David Monroe, the inventor, the visionary, the man who died with secrets that were finally coming to light. Outside the Palmer House, storm clouds were gathering over Chicago. But inside, in that quiet corner, the real storm was just beginning. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Palmer House conference room as Andrew Whitmore pulled out a worn leather portfolio. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened it, revealing photographs and documents that had been hidden away for nearly 2 decades. "Your father and I met at MIT, Whitmore began, his voice heavy with memories. "Spring of 1999. I was struggling with advanced thermodynamics, and David was already designing systems that wouldn't become mainstream for another decade." Elijah leaned forward, studying a faded photograph of 2 young men in a cluttered laboratory. His father, David Monroe, looked impossibly young, wearing a lab coat and that same confident smile Elijah had seen in the few pictures they had at home. "We were assigned as lab partners for our senior project," Whitmore continued. "I suggested we build something safe, something that would guarantee us a good grade. David wanted to revolutionize industrial safety monitoring. He won that argument." "What did you build?" "A mechanical stress detection system that could identify microscopic fractures in metal before they became dangerous." The professors were impressed. The industry was skeptical. But David didn't care about skepticism. He cared about potential. Whitmore flipped to another photo. After graduation, we pooled our savings, all $3,000 of it, and rented this tiny garage in Boston. Monroe Whitmore Technologies. God, we were naive. What changed? Success, Whitmore said simply. David's designs worked better than anyone imagined. We got our first contract with a small auto parts manufacturer. Then Boeing came calling. Within 2 years, we had 40 employees and more orders than we could handle. He pulled out a newspaper clipping. Young inventors strike gold with revolutionary safety technology. That's when Clayton Reynolds entered our lives. Whitmore's expression darkened. He was a venture capitalist, specialized in defense technology. He saw what David was creating and wanted in, offered us $10 million in funding. Did you take it? David was hesitant. He'd grown up poor, like you, and was suspicious of easy money. But I convinced him. I thought I was being smart. Reynolds seemed legitimate. He had connections, experience, everything we lacked. Whitmore showed Elijah another photograph. 3 men in expensive suits standing in front of a gleaming office building. Innovative Systems Technologies, our new company. Reynolds insisted on the rebrand, said Monroe Whitmore sounded like a law firm. My father agreed to this? He was focused on the work. As long as he could keep inventing, keep improving his designs, he didn't care what name was on the door. That was his first mistake. Mine was trusting Reynolds with the business side completely. Whitmore stood and walked to the window, looking out over Chicago's skyline. Your father's technology evolved rapidly. What started as simple stress detection became something extraordinary. Sensors that could predict structural failures. Days before they happened, prevent catastrophic accidents, save lives. That sounds amazing. It was. Until Reynolds started pushing for military applications. He saw dollar signs. Defense contracts worth hundreds of millions. He wanted to modify David's sensors for weapons guidance systems, target acquisition, battlefield surveillance. What did my father say? He refused. Absolutely refused. Said his work was meant to preserve life, not take it. They had terrible arguments. Reynolds would scream about missed opportunities, about competitors getting ahead. David would quietly go back to his lab and keep working on civilian applications. Whitmore returned to his seat, pulling out a thick folder marked confidential. Then, we discovered what Reynolds had been doing behind our backs. He'd been filing patents on variations of David's designs, small modifications that could be weaponized, using shell companies to sell prototypes to defense contractors. He'd built an entire shadow business based on your father's work. Without permission? Without knowledge. When David found out, Whitmore shook his head. I'd never seen him so angry. He confronted Reynolds in front of the entire board, said he'd rather destroy every prototype than let them be used for killing. What happened? Reynolds had been preparing for this. He'd structured our contracts, our patents, everything to give him control. Worse, he had leverage on me. Some bad investments I'd made, debts I couldn't pay. He threatened to destroy us both unless David signed over his rights. But my father didn't sign. No. He vanished instead. One night he cleared out his lab, took his most important research, his prototypes, everything, left me this note. Whitmore handed Elijah a piece of paper, creased from years of folding and unfolding. Andy, I'm sorry, but I can't let him win. What we created was meant to help people, not hurt them. I've taken what matters most. Keep the pendant safe. If something happens to me, make sure my family gets it. There's more to it than you know. David. The pendant? Elijah touched his chest where it hung. He gave it to me that last day, said it was important. But after he disappeared, I searched everywhere for him. 3 weeks later, I got word he'd died. Heart attack, they said. You didn't believe it. David was 29, healthy, no history of heart problems. But I had no proof of anything else. Reynolds took over the company completely, pushed me, out within 6 months. I've spent 20 years wondering if I could have done something different. Elijah studied the older man's face, seeing the guilt etched in every line. What happened to my father's research? The stuff he took? I assumed. It was lost. Until today when I saw you wearing that pendant. They sat in silence for a moment before Elijah asked, "Do you think Reynolds had my father killed?" "I can't prove anything, but Clayton Reynolds is now worth $15 billion, and every cent came from technology your father invented. You can draw your own conclusions." That evening, Elijah confronted his mother. Carmen was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of soup with more force than necessary, while Maya did homework at the table. "Maya, go to your room," Elijah said. "But I'm not. Done. Now." His tone must have conveyed the seriousness because Maya gathered her books without argument. Once they were alone, Elijah placed the business card on the table. Andrew Whitmore, Dad's old business partner. The spoon clattered against the pot. Carmen gripped the counter, her knuckles white. "Why didn't you tell me?" Elijah demanded. "Why did you let me think Dad was just some mechanic?" Carmen turned, and Elijah was shocked to see tears in her eyes. His mother never cried. "Because knowing the truth got your father killed," she said quietly. The words hung in the air like smoke. "Mama, what really happened?" Carmen sank into a chair, suddenly looking older than her years. "Your father was brilliant, Elijah. But brilliance isn't always enough in this world. He thought if you were smart enough, worked hard enough, played by the rules." She shook her head. "He didn't understand that men like Clayton Reynolds don't play by rules. Whitmore told me about the company, about the patents." "Whitmore." Carmen's voice turned bitter. "He means well, but he was weak when it mattered. When Clay started threatening your father, Whitmore did nothing. Dad took research when he left the company. He brought it here. Boxes of files, computer drives, notebooks filled with designs I couldn't understand. He was paranoid those last weeks, always looking over his shoulder, checking the locks twice, 3 times. What was he afraid of? Reynolds had people following him. Cars parked outside our apartment at all hours. Phone calls where nobody spoke. David wanted to go public with evidence of what Reynolds was doing, but what? But then I got pregnant with Maya, and David had to choose between justice and keeping his family safe. Elijah felt something cold settle in his stomach. He chose us. He tried to. Made a deal with Reynolds. He'd stay quiet if Clay left us alone. But Clay wanted more. He wanted all of David's research, wanted him to sign papers saying the company owned everything he'd ever invented or ever would invent. Dad refused. He signed everything except one document, something about a special project he'd been working on. Clay got obsessed with finding it. The harassment got worse. Then one morning, David said he was going to meet someone who could help make things right. "He kissed you goodbye, told me he'd be home for dinner." Carmen's voice broke. "The police found him in his car by the lake. Heart attack, they said. 29 years old. You don't believe that." 2 days after the funeral, men in suits came to the house. Very polite, very professional. Offered me money, a lot of money, to hand over all of David's research and sign some papers. When I refused, they got less polite. What happened? They broke in while we were at your grandmother's, took almost everything, but I'd hidden some things, the important things. She stood and walked to the kitchen drawer, pulling out a small key. "Storage unit on 47th, number 3247. I saved what I could. Why didn't you ever tell me?" "Because I wanted you to be safe. To have a normal life. Not spend your years chasing ghosts and making enemies of billionaires." She reached across and grabbed his hand. "Elijah, please. Let this go. I can't lose. You too." But they both knew he wouldn't. Couldn't. Later that night, Elijah texted Luis, "Need your help. Meet me tomorrow, 6 a.m. Bring your laptop." Luis showed up at the storage facility with coffee and his gear. "Man, it's Sunday. This better be worth it. Remember that rich guy? Turns out he knew my dad. And my dad wasn't just some mechanic. He was an inventor, had his own company until his partner screwed him over." "Seriously?" "Yeah. And my mom's been hiding his stuff here all these years." The storage unit was cramped and dusty. Boxes were stacked floor to ceiling, labeled in Carmen's careful handwriting. They found what they were looking for in the 3rd box. several old hard drives and a laptop that looked ancient. "Can you get into these?" Elijah asked. Luis grinned. "Does Chicago have wind?" While Luis worked on cracking the old encryption, Elijah went through physical files. Most were technical drawings beyond his understanding, but one folder caught his attention. Reynolds, evidence. Inside were emails, financial documents, and handwritten notes. As Elijah read, a pattern emerged. Reynolds had been systematically stealing David's designs, filing patents through shell companies, selling to defense contractors without David's knowledge. "Yo, check this out," Luis called. The laptop screen showed dozens of files. Luis clicked on one labeled Final Project. David Monroe appeared on screen looking tired and stressed. "If you're watching this, then something's happened to me. My name is David Monroe, and I need to document what Clayton Reynolds has done." Elijah's throat tightened hearing his father's voice. "Clay's been selling our technology to defense contractors, modifying my designs for weapon systems, but that's not the worst part. He's been testing these weapons illegally, covering up failures that have cost lives. I have proof, emails, test results, even recorded conversations." David held up a small device. "This is why they want me dead. I've created something that could make all their weapons obsolete. A resonance neutralizer that can detect and counteract the frequencies used in modern guidance systems. In the right hands, it could save thousands of lives. In the wrong hands..." The video cut off abruptly. "There's more," Luis said, clicking through files. "Blueprints, test results, even recorded. Phone calls. Your dad was building a case. Why didn't he use it? Maybe he didn't get the chance." Elijah's phone buzzed. A text from Whitmore. "Found something. Reynolds just filed new patents last week, based on your father's work. We need to meet." They met at Whitmore's office that evening. He'd been busy. "I still have contacts in the industry," Whitmore explained. "People talk. Reynolds has been developing something big, a new weapons platform based on technology that sounds exactly like what David was working on." "The neutralizer?" "No, the opposite. He's weaponized David's detection system, turned it into the most advanced targeting platform ever created. The Pentagon's already placed orders worth $2 billion. We have to stop him." "How?" "He's got lawyers, politicians, probably half the defense industry in his pocket. We go public, release everything." Whitmore shook his head. "It's not enough. These files are 20 years old. Reynolds will claim they're fake, that David sold him the rights legitimately. We need current evidence." That's when Elijah remembered something from the video, the way his father had emphasized certain words. The strange pause after "in the wrong hands." "The pendant," he said suddenly. "What about it?" "My dad said there was more to it than you knew. What if..." Back in his room, Elijah examined the pendant, more carefully than ever before. The design was intricate, 2 hands cradling a star. But looking closer, he noticed the star wasn't solid. It was composed of tiny lines that almost looked like circuit paths, he whispered. Using tools from his backpack, Elijah carefully opened the pendant. Inside was a tiny chip, no bigger than a grain of rice. "Luis," he called. "I need you." 20 minutes later, Luis arrived with his equipment. "Data storage chip," he confirmed. "Old school, but sophisticated. Give me a few minutes." The chip contained a single folder. For Elijah. With trembling fingers, Elijah opened it. Inside were dozens of files, documents, audio recordings, and one video labeled "The Truth." His father appeared on screen again, but this recording was different. He was sitting in what looked like their old apartment. Elijah recognized the faded wallpaper. "Hello, son. If you're watching this, you're old enough to understand. And if you found this message, you're smart enough to have figured out the pendant's secret." Elijah felt tears welling up. By now, you know about Reynolds and what he did. But there's more. Clay wasn't just stealing my patents. He was selling them to people who used them for terrible things. Weapons that killed innocent people. Surveillance systems used by dictators. I tried to stop him legally, but he owned judges, politicians, even police. David's expression grew serious. "When I threatened to go public, He made it clear he'd hurt your mother, hurt you. So I made a choice. I pretended to give up, to accept his terms. But secretly I was gathering evidence and working on something special. He held up a small device. This is a kill switch for every weapon system based on my technology. It works, Elijah. I've tested it. But using it would mean war with Reynolds, and I couldn't risk your safety. 3 days ago, Clay's men tried to break into our apartment while you and your mother were out. They were looking for this device and something else, a component I call the resonance crystal. Without it, the kill switch is useless. David leaned closer to the camera. I've hidden the crystal somewhere safe, somewhere only my son would think to look. Remember our last project together? The one we never finished? The video ended. What's he talking about? Luis asked. Elijah closed his eyes, thinking back. He'd been so young when his father died, but there was one memory that stood out clearly. They'd been in the garage, working on something. The music box, he said. We were building a music box for Mama's birthday. We never finished it after Dad died. You still have it? In my closet. They found the half-completed music box buried under old clothes. Luis examined it with a flashlight. There, he pointed. That compartment doesn't belong in a normal music box. Carefully, Elijah opened it. Inside was a small, clear crystal, no bigger than a marble, suspended in a protective case. The resonance crystal, Elijah breathed. The files from the pendant painted a complete picture. David had built a dead man's switch into all his patents. If someone tried to weaponize them beyond certain parameters, the systems would automatically shut down. But Reynolds had been manually overriding the safety protocols every 6 months. Look at this, Luis said, pointing to a log file. The next reset is due in 10 days, if nobody enters the code. Every weapon system based on my dad's tech stops working. They needed help. Elijah reached out to Sarah Chen, an investigative journalist Luis's cousin knew. She reviewed their evidence with growing amazement. This is explosive, she said, but also dangerous. Reynolds isn't just rich. He's connected. Defense contractors, senators, intelligence agencies all rely on his technology. People need to know the truth, Elijah insisted. I agree, but we need protection first. Let me reach out to some contacts. That night, Elijah finally told his mother everything. Carmen listened in silence, tears streaming down her face as she heard her husband's voice on the recordings. I knew he was gathering evidence, she said softly, but I begged him to stop. I was pregnant with Maya, scared for our family. Are you angry at him? For choosing justice over safety? I was, for a long time. But your father believed that talent came with responsibility, that if you could make the world better, you had an obligation to try. She squeezed his hand. You're just like him. The next morning, everything went wrong. Luis texted at dawn. Someone broke into the computer lab, stole the drives we were using. They met at their usual diner. Luis was shaken. There's more. Black SUV parked outside my parents' restaurant all morning. My dad's freaking out. Elijah's phone rang. Unknown number. Elijah Monroe? The voice was cold, professional. My name is Marcus Kane. I work for Mr. Reynolds. He'd like to meet with you. Not interested. I think you will be. We have your friend Luis's parents in custody. Immigration issues, you understand. Of course, these things can be resolved. Elijah's blood went cold. He looked at Luis, whose face had gone ashen. What do you want? Simple. Bring everything, all the files, the device your father made, the crystal. Bring it to the address I'm about to text you. Come alone. You have 2 hours or Luis's parents take a very long trip. The line went dead. They have my parents, Luis whispered. Elijah's mind raced. They couldn't go to the police. Reynolds owned too many of them. But if they handed over the evidence, the truth would die forever. Then he remembered something else from his father's files, about the override codes, about how the system worked. Luis, if you had access to Reynolds' network, could you change the reset protocol? Maybe, but I'd need to be inside their system. Elijah called Whitmore. I need a favor. A big one. Name. It. Can you get me into Reynolds' office? Elijah, what are you planning? I'm going to give Reynolds exactly what he wants, and then I'm going to use it to destroy him. 2 hours later, Elijah stood outside Reynolds Defense Industries, a gleaming, tower in downtown Chicago. In his backpack were all the files, the devices, and most importantly, the resonance crystal. But what Kane and Reynolds didn't know was that Luis had made copies of everything, and Whitmore was already inside the building, using his old executive access card to plant a simple USB drive in the server room, a drive containing a program Luis had written in the last hour. As Elijah walked through the lobby, he touched his father's pendant one last time, empty now, but somehow still carrying the weight of everything it represented. Smart choice, kid, Kane said as the elevator doors opened. Mr. Reynolds is looking forward to meeting you. Elijah stepped into the elevator. As it rose toward the executive floor, he thought about his father's words from the video, about responsibility, about doing what was right no matter the cost. The elevator doors opened, and Elijah walked forward to face the man who had destroyed his father. He was ready for whatever came next. The elevator ride to the executive floor felt like an eternity. Marcus Kane stood beside Elijah, his presence radiating menace despite his professional appearance. The man was built like a linebacker gone corporate, broad shoulders straining against his tailored suit, hands that looked like they could crush steel. Mr. Reynolds appreciates punctuality, Kane said as the elevator climbed. And cooperation. Elijah's backpack felt heavy with its cargo of secrets, the files, the devices, and most importantly, the resonance crystal his father had died protecting. But hidden in his shoe was a small USB drive Luis had given him, containing their insurance policy. The elevator doors opened to reveal a sprawling office suite that screamed wealth and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Chicago, while modern art pieces that probably cost more than Elijah's entire apartment building dotted the walls. Clayton Reynolds stood with his back to them, looking out over the city like a king surveying his domain. When he turned, Elijah was struck by how ordinary he looked. Average height, graying hair, the kind of face you'd forget in a crowd. But his eyes were different. Cold, calculating. The eyes of a man who'd gotten away with murder. Elijah Monroe, Reynolds said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. You look just like your father. You knew him well? Better than most. David was special. Brilliant, really. It's a shame things ended the way they did. The casual dismissal of his father's death made Elijah's blood boil, but he kept his face neutral. He had to play this smart. Please sit. Reynolds gestured to a leather chair. Kane tells me you've been busy, digging into old history. I found some of my father's things. Got curious. Curiosity, Reynolds smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Your father had that too. Always asking questions, always pushing boundaries. But sometimes, Elijah, it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. Is that a threat? It's advice. From someone who's been in this game a long time. Reynolds walked to his desk, pressing a button. A screen lowered from the ceiling, displaying financial charts. Do you know what your father's biggest mistake was? Elijah remained silent. He thought small. Saw his inventions as tools for safety, for prevention. I saw their true potential. Thanks to your father's genius and my vision, Reynolds Defense Industries is now the third largest defense contractor in the country. We've saved thousands of American lives. By taking thousands of others? Reynolds' smile faltered for a moment. The world isn't black and white, son. Your father never understood that. I think he understood perfectly. That's why he tried to stop you. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Reynolds leaned back in his chair, studying Elijah like a specimen under glass. What exactly do you think you know? I know you stole his patents, sold his technology to the highest bidder, had him followed, threatened, and when he wouldn't play ball. Elijah let the accusation hang in the air. Reynolds laughed, a sound like ice cracking. You've been watching too many movies. Your father had a heart condition. Tragic, but hardly unusual. He was 29. These things happen. Reynolds stood, walking to a cabinet. He poured amber liquid into 2 glasses. But we're not here to discuss ancient history. You have something that belongs to me. Belonged to my father. Semantics. Reynolds offered him a glass. Elijah didn't take it. The courts decided long ago who owns those patents. But there's one piece missing. Something your father took when he left the company. I believe you found it. The resonance crystal, Elijah thought. But how could Reynolds know? As if reading his mind, Reynolds smiled. We've been monitoring your activities. The storage unit, the late-night computer sessions with your friend Luis. Speaking of which, he pressed another button. A second screen showed security footage of Luis's parents being led into an unmarked building by men in suits. They seem nice, Reynolds said conversationally. Hard-working immigrants. It would be a shame if they had to leave the country. Elijah's hands clenched into fists. Let them go, of course, as soon as you give me what I want. Everything your father took, including the crystal. There it was. Confirmation that Reynolds knew about the resonance crystal. But how? I need guarantees, Elijah said, that Luis's parents will be released, that you'll leave my family alone. You're in no position to make demands. Maybe not, but I'm the only one who knows where everything is. Elijah reached into his backpack slowly, pulling out a stack of files. This is just a sample. The rest is hidden, multiple locations. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. You're bluffing. Try me. They stared at each other across the desk, 2 chess players calculating their next moves. Finally, Reynolds nodded. Kane will release your friend's parents once I verify what you've brought. Then you'll lead us to the rest. Elijah placed the files on the desk, then pulled out the small device his father had built, the resonance neutralizer. Reynolds' eyes lit up with hungry interest. Remarkable, he murmured, examining it. 20 years, and still ahead of its time. And the crystal? Elijah hesitated, then reached into his backpack once more. The clear crystal caught the afternoon light, seeming to pulse with inner fire. Reynolds reached for it eagerly. At that moment, Elijah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, package delivered, W. Whitmore had succeeded. The USB drive was in the system. Reynolds was still examining the crystal when his desk phone rang. He answered impatiently. What? Now? Fine. Send them up. He hung up looking annoyed. Federal agents. Apparently there's been some cyber intrusion. Attempt. Kane, take our guest to the conference room. I'll handle this. As Kane led him out, Elijah caught a glimpse of the agents entering. 2 men in dark suits, badges flashing. But something felt off. Their suits were too perfect, their movements too rehearsed. In the conference room, Kane stationed himself by the door, while Elijah sat at the long table. Through the glass walls he could see Reynolds talking to the agents, gesturing animatedly. Your friend's parents will be released within the hour, Kane said. Mr. Reynolds keeps his word. Like he did with my father. Kane's expression didn't change. Your father made his choices. To stand up to a thief and a murderer, to threaten a multi-billion-dollar enterprise, to put ideology over profit, to forget who his real friends were. Before Elijah could respond, his phone buzzed again. This time it was Luis. Code uploaded, waiting for your signal. The plan was simple. Luis's program would alter the reset protocol for the weapon systems, making it impossible for Reynolds to maintain control. But they needed access to Reynolds' personal terminal to implement it. Suddenly, raised voices came from Reynolds' office. Through the glass, Elijah saw one of the agents pull out a document. Reynolds' face went red with anger. What's happening? Elijah asked. Kane moved to the door, speaking into his earpiece. His expression darkened. Stay here, he ordered, then left the room. Alone, Elijah quickly texted Luis. Something's wrong. Be ready. Through the glass walls, he watched as the scene in Reynolds' office grew more heated. Papers were produced. Reynolds was shouting. And then, to Elijah's shock, One of the agents placed handcuffs on Reynolds' wrists. Kane burst back into the conference room. "We need to go, now." "What's happening?" "Those aren't real federal agents. Someone set us up." Kane grabbed Elijah's arm. "You're coming with me." But before they could move, the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alarms began to wail. In the chaos, Elijah broke free from Kane's grip and ran. He needed to get to Reynolds' computer. The executive office was empty now. Reynolds and the fake agents were gone. Elijah dove for the desk, plugging in the USB drive from his shoe. Come on," he muttered as the program uploaded. Kane appeared in the doorway. "Stop!" But it was too late. The screen flashed. "Protocol updated. Reset sequence modified." Kane advanced, reaching for his weapon. Elijah grabbed the resonance crystal from Reynolds' desk and held it up. "You need this, right? For the weapons to work? Don't do anything stupid, kid. My father wasn't stupid. He was trying to save lives. Your father was naive, just like you." Elijah backed toward the window. Maybe. But he was also right. Security. Guards appeared behind Kane. Elijah was trapped. But then his phone buzzed one more time. "Whitmore. Look outside." Through the window, Elijah saw news vans pulling up to the building. Reporters were already setting up cameras. Someone had leaked the story. Kane saw it too. His face hardened with decision. "Give me the crystal. Last chance." "You want it?" Elijah held it up. "Come get it." He threw the crystal against the window with all his strength. The safety glass cracked but held. The crystal bounced back, skittering across the floor. Kane and the guards lunged for it. In the confusion, Elijah ran. He burst through the stairwell door, taking the steps 3 at a time. His phone guided him. Texts from Luis directing him to a service exit where Whitmore waited in a car. They sped away as police sirens filled the air. "The fake agents?" Elijah asked. "Friends of mine," Whitmore said. "Former FBI. They won't hold Reynolds long, but long enough for the story to break." "Luis's parents?" "Already safe. My people got them out 20 minutes ago." Elijah slumped in, his seat, exhaustion hitting him. But it wasn't over. Not yet. That evening, they gathered at Whitmore's office. Elijah, Luis, Carmen, Sarah Chen, and Whitmore himself. The journalist had her laptop open, typing furiously. "The story's already getting traction," she said. "Reynolds' corp stock is plummeting. 3 senators are calling for investigations." "But we still don't have enough," Whitmore said. "Reynolds will claim the evidence was fabricated. His lawyers will bury this." "Not if we can prove he's been manually overriding the weapon safety protocols," Luis said. "The program I uploaded. We'll force him to try to reset them within 48 hours. When he does, we'll have real-time proof." "He still has the crystal," Elijah pointed out. "Actually," Carmen spoke up, reaching into her purse. "He has this." She pulled out an identical crystal. Elijah stared. "Mama? You think I'd let you walk into that man's office with the real one? Your father made 2. This is cubic zirconia. Pretty, but useless." For the first time in days, Elijah laughed. His mother had been playing chess while everyone else played checkers. "So we wait," Whitmore said. "When Reynolds tries to reset the weapon systems, he'll fail," Luis grinned. "And we'll have him." Sarah's phone rang. She answered, listened, then went pale. "Turn on the news." The television showed Reynolds at a press conference, looking nothing like the man who'd been arrested hours earlier. He stood confident, composed, playing the victim. "These baseless accusations are nothing more than corporate sabotage," he was saying. "Disgruntled former employees, conspiracy theorists, and sadly, the misguided son of a troubled man who took his own life 20 years ago." Elijah felt his anger rising, but Reynolds wasn't done. David Monroe was a brilliant engineer, but unstable. He suffered from paranoid delusions, believed the government was after him. His suicide was tragic, but not surprising to those who knew him well. "That lying piece of—" Carmen started. "Wait," Sarah held up her hand. "Look at his tie clip." They leaned closer to the screen. The tie clip glinted in the camera flashes and picked up audio beautifully. He's wearing a wire, Whitmore realized. This whole press conference is being recorded. By who? Elijah's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered cautiously. Enjoying the show? It was Kane. What do you want? To offer you a deal. Mr. Reynolds is willing to be generous. Very generous. All you have to do is walk away. Not interested. $20 million. Clean money. And a guarantee of safety for everyone you care about. The room had gone silent. Everyone was watching Elijah. You can't buy the truth, Elijah said. Can't I? Check your friend Luis's bank account. Luis pulled out his phone, his face going ashen. There's $5 million in my account. A down payment, Kane said. There's more where that came from. All Luis has to do is admit he fabricated the evidence. Take the fall. He's young, first offense, probably won't even serve time. Luis was staring at the phone screen, his hands shaking. $5 million. His parents could buy a house. His sisters could go to college. Luis, Elijah said quietly. Don't. But Luis wasn't looking at him. He was looking at his phone, at the number that could change his family's life forever. I need time to think, Luis said finally. You have until morning, Kane replied. Choose wisely. The line went dead. The safe house felt like a pressure cooker about to explode. Luis sat in the corner, staring at his phone, while the others argued about their next move. The $5 million in his account seemed to pulse on the screen, like a heartbeat. We stick to the plan, Whitmore insisted. When Reynolds tries to reset the weapon systems, if he tries, Sarah interrupted, he might know it's a trap. He has to try, Elijah said. Without the reset, billions in defense, contracts become worthless in 9 days. Luis still hadn't spoken. His phone kept buzzing. Texts from his parents, his sisters, cousins he hadn't heard from in years. Word had gotten out about the money. Luis, Carmen said gently. Talk to us. $5 million, Luis whispered. My parents have worked their whole lives and never seen a fraction of that. They could retire. My sisters could go to any school they want. It's blood money, Elijah said. Is it? Or is it just practical? Luis looked up, his eyes tortured. What if we lose? What if Reynolds walks away clean and we're left with nothing? We won't lose, Elijah insisted. We have the evidence, the crystal. Evidence can be discredited. Crystals can be stolen, but $5 million? Luis shook his head. That's real. That's security. That's betrayal, Elijah shot back. The words hung in the air like a slap. Luis flinched as if struck. You think this is easy for me? Luis demanded. You think I want to? He stopped, running his hands through his hair. I need some air. He left the room. Through the window, they watched him pace the parking lot, phone pressed to his ear. He's calling them, Sarah said quietly. He won't turn, Elijah said, but uncertainty colored his voice. Luis wouldn't do that. But even as he spoke, doubt crept in. $5 million was life-changing money, and Luis's family had sacrificed so much. An hour passed, then 2. Luis remained outside, a lone figure in the parking lot. Finally, as midnight approached, he came back in. I need to check something, he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. He went to his laptop, began typing, rapidly. Luis. Elijah moved closer. Just give me a minute. Luis's fingers flew over the keyboard. Code scrolled across the screen, the program they'd uploaded to Reynolds' system. Then Elijah saw it. A small change in the code, barely noticeable, unless you knew what to look for. What did you do? Luis kept typing. Nothing, just checking for bugs. But Elijah knew his friend's tells, the slight tremor in his voice, the way he wouldn't make eye contact. You modified the code. The room went silent. Luis's fingers stilled on the keyboard. Luis, Carmen said softly. What did you do? Finally, Luis looked up. His eyes were red, filled with tears. I'm sorry. The words hit Elijah like a physical blow. No. They threatened my parents' citizenship, said they'd find violations, get them deported. My sisters were born here, but my parents... Luis's voice broke. I can't. Let them be separated. So you sold us out, Elijah said coldly. I made it look like a glitch. The program will still work, just not the way we planned. Reynolds will be able to reset the systems, but it'll look suspicious. We can still use that. To do what? Give him a slap on the wrist while he keeps making billions from my father's stolen work? Eli, please understand. Understand what? That you chose money over justice? That you betrayed everything we've worked for? Luis stood abruptly. Not. Everyone can afford to be noble, Eli. Not everyone has the luxury of principles when their family's on the line. My father died for his principles. And look where it got him. The words echoed in the sudden silence. Luis immediately looked stricken. Eli, I didn't mean... Get out. What? You heard me. Take your money and get out. Luis looked around the room, seeking support, but found only disappointed faces. Even Sarah, who understood the complexities of compromise better than most, couldn't meet his eyes. I'm sorry, Luis whispered again, then gathered his things and left. As the door closed behind him, Elijah felt something inside him break. Luis had been his best friend since second grade. They'd shared everything, dreams, fears, hopes for the future. And now? We're compromised, Whitmore said grimly. If Luis gave them access to our plans, he wouldn't, Elijah started, then stopped. An hour ago, he would have sworn Luis would never betray them at all. We need to assume the worst, Sarah said. Change locations, alter our strategy. As they hurriedly packed up, Elijah's phone buzzed. A text from Luis. Check your email. I'm sorry. Against his better judgment, Elijah opened his email. There was a message from Luis with an attachment. They made me forward this to Kane, the message read. But I made a copy first. Use it, please. The attachment was a video file. Elijah played it, and Reynolds appeared on screen. But this was different from his public persona. He was in what looked like a private office, speaking to someone off camera. The Monroe kid has to be handled, Reynolds was saying. Just like his father. Make it look like an accident. Gang violence, maybe. Nobody will question another dead black kid from the South Side. The room went deathly quiet. My God, Carmen whispered. There's more, Elijah said, fast-forwarding. The video showed Reynolds meeting with various people, discussing bribes, cover-ups, and most damningly, the murder of David Monroe. I want it to look natural, Reynolds said in one clip. Heart attack. He's young, but these things happen. Dr. Morrison knows what to do. Luis recorded this? Sarah asked. No, Elijah realized. He found it in Reynolds' own files. The idiot was keeping blackmail material on himself. Or someone was keeping it on him, Whitmore suggested. Either way, this changes everything. But even as hope rekindled, Elijah felt the sting of betrayal. Luis had given them this evidence, yes, but he'd still modified the code, still taken the money. What do we do now? Carmen asked. We adapt, Sarah said. This video is dynamite, but we need to verify its authenticity, and we need to protect ourselves. Reynolds just ordered a hit on Elijah. I have contacts in the FBI, Whitmore said. Real ones, not like the actors I hired. They've been building a case against Reynolds. For years, this might be what they need. And the weapon systems? Elijah asked. Without Luis's original code, we can't force Reynolds' hand. But maybe we don't need to. This video might be enough. They relocated to a new safe house, a cabin outside the city that belonged to one of Whitmore's friends. As dawn broke, they made contact with FBI Special Agent Patricia Williams, who had been investigating Reynolds for years. This video is exactly what we've been looking for, she said after reviewing it. But we need to move fast. Reynolds has connections everywhere. Including in your agency? Elijah asked. Especially in my agency. That's why we're keeping this close. Only my most trusted people know. As they planned their next move, Elijah's phone rang. Luis. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Eli. Luis's voice was strained. They know about the video. Kane's coming for you. They tracked your phones. The line went dead. We need to go, Elijah said. Now. They grabbed their essential materials and fled just as black SUVs appeared. On the cabin's access road, Agent Williams led them through back roads, her team providing cover. Where are we going? Carmen asked. Federal courthouse, Williams replied. Judge Morrison is standing by with warrants. Once we file this evidence officially, Reynolds can't make it disappear. But Reynolds had one more card to play. As they neared the courthouse, Williams's radio crackled. Hostage situation at the courthouse. Armed men have taken control. They're demanding to speak to someone named Elijah Monroe. Elijah felt his blood run cold. They're using hostages to flush me out. We can't let you go in there, Williams said. You have to. They'll kill people. That's exactly what they want. You walk in, you die. The evidence dies with you. But Elijah was already forming a plan. Not if we're smart about it. He outlined his idea quickly. It was risky, possibly suicidal, but it might work. 30 minutes later, Elijah walked into the courthouse alone, hands raised. Kane waited in the lobby surrounded by armed men and terrified hostages. Smart boy, Kane said. Where's the evidence? Safe. Let the hostages go, and I'll tell you. Not how this works. Kane raised his weapon. Last chance. You're right, Elijah said. It's not how this works. At that moment, every screen in the courthouse lit up. The video of Reynolds played on loop, his confession, his orders for murder, his casual discussion of bribes and cover-ups. What the? Kane spun around. Live broadcast, Elijah said. Every news station in the country, plus social media. It's over. Kane's face contorted with rage. He aimed his gun at Elijah. You little... The shot never came. FBI agents burst through every entrance. The takedown was swift, professional. Kane and his men surrendered without firing a shot. Even they knew when the game was lost. As Kane was led away in handcuffs, he passed Elijah. You have no idea what you've started, kid. Maybe not, Elijah replied. But I know what I finished. Hours later, as the sun set over Chicago, Elijah stood outside the courthouse with his mother, Whitmore, and Agent Williams. Reynolds had been arrested at his mansion, caught trying to flee the country. The weapons systems were being shut down globally, their safety protocols permanently engaged. Your father would be proud, Carmen said, squeezing Elijah's hand. I know. Elijah touched the pendant at his neck, filled once again with its hidden chip. But it's not over. There's still the trial, the lawsuits. Let tomorrow worry about tomorrow, Whitmore said. Today, David Monroe's son did what his father couldn't. You brought down an empire. As they talked, a familiar figure approached hesitantly. Luis stood at the edge of the courthouse steps looking uncertain. I testified, he said quietly. Gave back the money. Told them everything. Elijah studied his former best friend. The betrayal still stung, might always sting. But he also understood the impossible position Luis had been in. Your parents? Elijah asked. Safe. The FBI's protecting them. Eli, I don't. Elijah held up his hand. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not yet. Luis nodded, understanding. Some wounds needed time to heal. Some betrayals, even those born of love and fear, left scars that lasted. As Luis walked away, Elijah felt his mother's arm around his shoulders. You did good, baby, she said. Your daddy's watching, and he's smiling. Above them, the first stars were appearing in the evening sky. Elijah touched his pendant one more time, thinking of his father, of justice delayed but not denied, of truth that refused to stay buried. The war wasn't over. But today they'd won a crucial battle, and sometimes that was enough. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles. But tonight, under the stars his father had once shown him how to find, Elijah Monroe allowed himself a moment of peace. He'd kept his promise. He'd finished what his father started, and somewhere he knew David Monroe was finally at rest. The federal courthouse had become a makeshift war room. FBI agents worked alongside tech specialists, sifting through decades of Reynolds Defense Industries files, while Elijah sat with Agent Patricia Williams, reviewing the video evidence that had brought an empire to its knees. "Your father was meticulous," Williams said, studying the documents. "This recording alone has phrases we've been trying to prove for years. But there's something bothering me." "What's that?" "How did your father manage to record Reynolds saying these things? Some of these conversations happened in secured locations, Reynolds' private office, his home study, places that were regularly swept for bugs." Elijah frowned. It was a question he hadn't considered in the chaos of recent events. He pulled out his laptop and began examining the audio files more carefully. The quality was too good, too clear for a hidden microphone, and the angles in the video footage. These weren't recorded secretly, Elijah realized. Reynolds was recording himself. Why would he do that? Insurance or leverage? Elijah's mind raced. My dad was brilliant with electronics. What if he didn't plant bugs in Reynolds' office? What if he modified Reynolds' own security system to create these recordings? Williams leaned forward. Keep going. Reynolds is paranoid. He'd want recordings of every meeting in case someone tried to blackmail him or renege on a deal. But my dad could have programmed the system to create a separate archive, one Reynolds didn't know about. Hidden in plain sight, Williams mused. Brilliant. But how did these recordings end up in Reynolds' own files where Luis found them? Before Elijah could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown, but something made him answer. Elijah Monroe? The voice was elderly, refined. My name is Dr. James Morrison. I believe it's time we spoke about your father. Elijah's blood ran cold. Dr. Morrison, the name Reynolds had mentioned in the recording. The doctor who was supposed to make David's death look natural. What do you want? To clear my conscience. I'm dying, Mr. Monroe. Cancer. I have weeks, perhaps days. Before I go, I need to tell someone the truth about what happened to your father. Elijah looked at Williams, who was already signaling her agents to trace the call. I'm listening, Elijah said. Not over the phone. FBI headquarters. 1 hour. I'll turn myself in. I want immunity for what I'm about to reveal. Not for me, but for my daughter. She knew nothing about any of this. The line went dead. An hour later, Dr. Morrison sat across from Elijah in an FBI interview room. He was frail, his skin papery, but his eyes were sharp with intelligence and regret. I was Reynolds' personal physician, he began. Also his fixer when medical situations arose. But your father was different. I'd never been asked to kill anyone before. But you did it. Anyway, no. Morrison's answer surprised everyone. I refused. Reynolds was furious, threatened my medical license, my family. But I couldn't do it. I took an oath to do no harm. Then how did my father die? Reynolds had backup plans. There was an experimental drug, something developed for the CIA during the Cold War. Undetectable, mimics a natural heart attack perfectly. He had someone else administer it, someone who worked in the restaurant where your father had his last meal. Elijah felt sick. His father had been poisoned during lunch, probably never even knew what hit him. But that's not why I'm here, Morrison continued. I'm here because of what happened after. Reynolds was paranoid about loose ends. He kept recordings of everything, including the meetings where he planned your father's murder. I knew where. He hid these recordings, and you took them? I copied them. I've been moving them around for 20 years, keeping them safe, waiting for the right moment. When I heard about your confrontation with Reynolds, I knew it was time. I'm the one who made sure those recordings ended up where your friend Luis could find them. Williams leaned forward. You've been playing a long game. The longest. Reynolds destroyed a good man, left a boy without his father. I couldn't save David Monroe, but maybe I could help his son get justice. Where are the rest of the recordings? Elijah asked. Morrison reached into his jacket and pulled out a small hard drive. Everything. 20 years of Reynolds crimes. Financial fraud, bribery, weapons sold to terrorist organizations, and yes, murder. Not just your father. There were others who got in his way. Williams took the drive carefully. With your testimony and these recordings, you can bury him, Morrison finished, and everyone who helped him. As Morrison was led away to provide his formal statement, Elijah's phone buzzed. It was Whitmore. "Turn on the news," he said. "Reynolds is making a statement." They found a television in the break room. Reynolds stood outside his mansion, flanked by expensive lawyers, looking every inch the persecuted businessman. "These allegations are part of a coordinated attack on American industry," he declared. "Foreign agents working with domestic terrorists have fabricated evidence to destroy one of this nation's vital defense contractors. I call on all patriotic Americans to see through this deception." "He's trying to spin this as espionage," Williams muttered, but Reynolds wasn't finished. "I have evidence that Elijah Monroe has been in contact with Iranian intelligence, that the technology his father stole was intended for our enemies. This isn't about justice, it's about treason." Elijah felt his anger rising. "He's lying." Of course he is," Williams said. "But he's got media contacts, political allies. He's trying to muddy the waters, make this about national security instead of his crimes." Elijah's phone buzzed again. This time it was Luis. "You need to see this," Luis said when Elijah answered. "Reynolds isn't just making random accusations. He's got manufactured evidence, fake emails, doctored photos. He's been preparing for this." "How? Do you know?" "Because Kane tried to get me to create some of it. Before I turned on you guys. He wanted me to hack your email, plant evidence. I refused, but someone else must have done it." Elijah felt the walls closing in. Reynolds was fighting back with everything he had. "Luis, where are you?" "Outside. I want to help. I know I messed up, but come in, we need you." 20 minutes later, Luis was in the FBI's cybercrimes unit, his fingers flying over a keyboard as he traced the fake evidence back to its source. "Got it," he said finally. "The forgeries came from a server farm in Nevada, shell company owned by, surprise, surprise, a subsidiary of Reynolds Defense Industries." "Can you prove it?" Williams asked. "Better. I can show you the metadata proving when these files were created, all within the last 48 hours, and I can trace the payment for the server farm directly to Reynolds' personal accounts." Elijah watched his friend work, seeing the determination in Luis's eyes. The betrayal still stung, but Luis was trying to make things right. "There's something else," Luis said. "Before everything went down, I installed a backdoor in Reynolds' network. I can still access their internal communications." "That's illegal," Williams pointed out. "So is murder," Luis shot back. "Look, Reynolds is planning something. His private security force is mobilizing, and there are messages about securing the secondary site." "What secondary site?" Luis pulled up a schematic. "Underground facility in Wisconsin. Off the books, not on any official company records, but I found references to it in the encrypted files." Elijah studied the layout. "It's a bunker. He's planning to run." "Not just run," Luis corrected. "Look at these inventory lists. Weapons, servers, communication equipment. He's setting up a command center." Williams was already on her phone. "I need surveillance on a location in Wisconsin. Possible fugitive situation." But Elijah was thinking about something else. The resonance crystal. The real one his mother had kept hidden. Reynolds still thought he had it, but without it, his weapon systems would eventually shut down. "He's going to try to reverse engineer the crystal," Elijah realized. "That's why he needs the command center. He's going to try to break my father's encryption before the systems fail." "Then we need to stop him," Williams said. "No," Elijah said firmly. "I need to stop him. This started with my father, and it's going to end with me." Williams shook her head. "I can't authorize a civilian. You don't have to. I'm not asking for permission." Before anyone could stop him, Elijah was moving. He grabbed his backpack, checking that the real resonance crystal was still secure in its hidden compartment. "Eli, wait!" Luis called after him. Elijah paused at the door. You coming or not? Luis didn't hesitate. Let's finish this. As they raced toward Wisconsin, Elijah's phone rang. It was Sarah Chen. Whatever you're planning, make it fast, she said. Reynolds just gave another interview. He's claiming the video evidence is deep-faked, that you're part of a conspiracy to destroy American defense capabilities. Some people are buying it. Let them. We're about to make it impossible for him to keep lying. The Wisconsin facility was hidden beneath a renovated industrial complex. As they approached, they could see Reynolds' security forces setting up a perimeter. How do we get in? Luis asked. Elijah smiled grimly. The same way my father would have. Through the back door he built into every system he ever designed. Using a tablet, Elijah accessed the facility's environmental controls. David Monroe's hidden signature was there, buried in the code after 20 years. Dad always said every castle needs a secret entrance, Elijah murmured as he input a sequence. Around the facility, ventilation fans reversed, alarms misfired, and security doors unlocked randomly. In the chaos, Elijah and Luis slipped inside. They found Reynolds in a sterile laboratory, surrounded by technicians working frantically on equipment. The fake resonance crystal sat in a testing chamber, inert and useless. It's over, Reynolds, Elijah announced. Reynolds spun around, his mask of composure cracking. You arrogant little, do you have any idea what you've done? The systems I control protect this country. The systems my father designed save lives. You turned them into weapons. Your father was a dreamer who didn't understand how the world works. My father understood perfectly. That's why he built safeguards into everything he created. Elijah held up the real resonance crystal. Without this, your entire weapons network shuts down in 3 days, and I'm the only one who knows how it works. Reynolds' face went purple with rage. Give it to me. No, but I'll make you a deal. Confess, publicly, to everything. The theft, the murders, all of it. Do that, and I'll show you how to convert the weapon systems back to their original purpose, saving lives instead of taking them. You expect me to destroy myself? You already did that when you killed my father. This is just making it official. For a moment it looked like Reynolds might physically attack him. Then his shoulders sagged. I had no choice, he said quietly. Your father was going to ruin everything. The contracts, the money, the power. You had every choice. Elijah cut him off. You chose wrong. FBI agents flooded the facility. Williams had followed them, bringing backup. As Reynolds was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Elijah. Your father would be proud, he said bitterly. I know, Elijah replied. 6 months later, Elijah stood in the cemetery, fresh flowers in his hand. The headstone was simple. David Monroe, inventor, father, hero. Hey, Dad, Elijah said softly. Thought you'd want to know what's been happening. He knelt, placing the flowers carefully. Reynolds got life without parole. 14 counts of fraud, 3 counts of murder, and about 50 other charges. His whole network came tumbling down. Turns out when you squeeze people hard enough, they start talking to save themselves. A breeze rustled through the trees and Elijah smiled. Luis and I started a non-profit with Sarah. We're exposing corruption, helping whistleblowers. He's still trying to make up for, but we're getting there. Forgiveness takes time. Footsteps approached. Carmen joined him, placing her own flowers beside his. The ceremony's about to start, she said gently. They walked together to the nearby community center, where a crowd had gathered. A banner read, Grand Opening, the David Monroe Innovation Center. Whitmore stood at the podium, looking healthier than he had in years. The guilt that had weighed him down was finally lifting. David Monroe believed that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around, Whitmore told the crowd. This center will carry on that vision, providing resources and mentorship to young inventors who want to change the world. Applause filled the room. Elijah spotted familiar faces. Agent Williams, now heading a task force investigating defense contractor corruption. Dr. Morrison's daughter, who had become an advocate for corporate accountability. even some of Reynolds's former employees who had chosen conscience over complicity. Luis approached, looking nervous. "Ready for your speech?" Elijah nodded. Their friendship was still healing, but they were working on it. Trust, once broken, had to be rebuilt, brick by brick. Taking the podium, Elijah looked out at the crowd. In the front row sat Maya, now 9, wearing a t-shirt that read Future Engineer. "My father used to tell me that we don't inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children," Elijah began. He believed that with great talent comes great responsibility, that if you can make the world better, you have an obligation to try. He touched the pendant at his throat, no longer hiding secrets, but worn proudly as a symbol of justice achieved. David Monroe died protecting that belief. But ideas don't die. They pass from one generation to the next, growing stronger, with each telling. After the ceremony, Elijah gave tours of the center. The main workshop was filled with state-of-the-art equipment, all of it configured with safety protocols based on David's original designs. "The resonance crystal technology is being adapted for civilian use," Elijah explained to a group of students. "Earthquake detection, structural integrity monitoring, even early warning systems for tsunamis." One young girl raised her hand. "Is it true you brought down a whole evil corporation by yourself?" Elijah smiled. "Nobody does anything important by themselves. I had help, from family, friends, even people I never met who believed in doing the right thing." As the day wound down, Elijah found himself alone in his father's old office, now recreated in the center. Whitmore had donated David's original sketches and notebooks, which lined the walls. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Sarah Chen entered, laptop in hand. "Got a minute? There's something you should see." She showed him a video. Reynolds, in Prison Orange, giving an interview to a documentary crew. "I was wrong," Reynolds was saying, looking older, deflated. "I let greed blind me to what really mattered. David Monroe was the best man I ever knew, and I destroyed him. I can't undo that, but I can finally tell the truth." "When did he record this?" Elijah asked. "Last week. It's part of a plea deal. He's testifying before Congress about defense industry corruption, naming names, exposing the whole system." Elijah felt something shift inside him. Not forgiveness. Reynolds had done too much for that. But perhaps the beginning of closure. That evening, the Monroe family gathered for dinner. Carmen had cooked David's favorite meal, and for the first time in months the kitchen felt warm with laughter instead of heavy with secrets. "So," Carmen said, serving the food, "I hear MIT called again." Elijah nodded. "They want to create a scholarship in Dad's name, full ride for students from underserved communities who show promise in engineering. And I'm thinking about it. But first, I need to help get the Innovation Center fully operational," Maya piped up. "I'm going to go to MIT too. I'm going to invent something that helps people." "I believe you will, Squirt," Elijah said, ruffling her hair. After dinner, Elijah stepped onto the fire escape, looking out over the city. Chicago sprawled before him, lights twinkling like stars. Somewhere out there, other young inventors were dreaming up ways to change the world. His phone buzzed. "Luis, you see the news? 3 more defense contractors under investigation. The dominoes keep falling." "Good," Elijah typed back. "Dad always said sunlight was the best disinfectant." "Hey, about tomorrow's workshop. You still need help with the robotics class?" Elijah smiled. "Always." As he put his phone away, Elijah reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a chance encounter on a lonely road to the takedown of a corporate empire. From a son seeking answers to a young man carrying forward his father's legacy. The pendant caught the streetlight, its design, 2 hands cradling a star, more meaningful now than ever. David Monroe had reached across death itself to guide his son toward justice. "Thanks, Dad," Elijah whispered to the night sky. "For everything." A year later, Elijah stood before another crowd, this time at the National Press Club in Washington. The David Monroe Foundation had exposed corruption in 3 more major defense contractors, leading to reforms in government procurement processes. "My father believed that integrity wasn't just about being honest," Elijah told the assembled journalists. It was about having the courage to stand up when you see something wrong, even when it costs you everything. In the audience, Carmen sat next to Whitmore, both beaming with pride. Luis operated cameras alongside Sarah, documenting everything for their growing platform. Even Agent Williams was there, now promoted to deputy director. After the press conference, a young reporter approached. "Mr. Monroe, what's next for the foundation?" Elijah considered the question. "We're expanding internationally. Corruption doesn't respect borders, and neither should accountability. Any regrets about how things played out? Only that my father isn't here to see it. But then again," Elijah touched the pendant. "Maybe he is." That night, as Elijah worked, late in his office, his computer chimed with a video call. It was Maya, now 10 and already showing signs of David's genius. "Eli, look what I made." She held up a small device. "It's a water purification sensor. It can detect contaminants down to parts per billion." "That's amazing, Maya. Dad would be so proud." "I know," she said matter-of-factly. "That's why I'm naming it the David detector." After the call, Elijah walked to the window. The world wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a little better than it had been a year ago, and tomorrow, he and others like him would work to make it better still. On his desk sat a photo, not one of the old faded images of David Monroe, but a new one. It showed Elijah at the Innovation Center, surrounded by eager young faces, the pendant visible at his throat. In the corner of the frame, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, was the reflection of a man who looked remarkably like David, smiling with approval. Elijah had learned the most important lesson his father had to teach, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but action in spite of it. That integrity isn't just personal virtue, but a force that can change the world. And that love, for family, for truth, for justice, can transcend even death itself. As he switched off the lights and headed home, Elijah Monroe carried his father's legacy not as a burden, but as a beacon. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles for truth and justice. But armed with his father's wisdom and his own hard-won experience, he was ready. The pendant swung gently with each step, catching the light, carrying the dreams of one generation into the hands of the next. And somewhere, David Monroe rested peacefully, knowing his son had not just completed his work, but transcended it. The boy who had fixed a stranger's car on a lonely road had become a man who fixed broken systems, exposed hidden truths, and lit the way for others to follow. The legacy lived on. What secrets might be hiding in plain sight in your own family's history? And would you have the courage to uncover them if given the chance? If this story of justice and redemption moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible tales of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances.